Happy Saturday, everyone. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day today. My name is Andrew Heichman. I'm the lead forecaster here in WW116. So honestly, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on right now in terms of the tropics and in terms of severe weather, which we'll actually get to in a moment. That disturbance actually we've been looking at for the last few days has actually become a hurricane now. We're now talking Hurricane Rick, in which we'll get into here in a moment. And then, of course, with tomorrow's, severe weather outbreak, with large tornadoes, large hail, and damaging winds expected, there's a lot of craziness that's kind of going on in terms of the weather side of things. So definitely stay tuned for that. And they'll be moving into, later on in the video, we'll be taking a look at satellite view. Basically, taking a look at, what areas are sunny and what areas are not. We'll be taking a look at some forecast models, for tomorrow's severe weather. And then at the end of the video, we'll be taking a look at the National Weather Service hazards. So basically warnings and watches, advisories and so on. But that's basically what we're going to be in store for today, for today's video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get on into it. So in terms of the Atlantic Ocean, there's really not much going on right now. It's relatively quiet. We are still in hurricane season, in which, in last video, I actually mentioned that, hurricane season ended on November 31st. I was wrong. It actually ends on November 30th. So we still have a little bit over a month left of hurricane season, and we're kind of in a quiet period in terms of the Atlantic Ocean as of right now. But, don't be surprised if this ramps up in the next few weeks, because honestly, sea surface temperatures here in the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico are well supportive of tropical cyclones. Now, of course, that does kind of rely on, in terms of if there's a lot of shear, which is basically, like winds at upper levels. If you have a lot of shear for tropical cyclones, it can actually tear the storms apart. So if you have an area with not much shear, and, you have, of course, those sea surface temperatures being relatively warm. And moisture is another thing. If you don't have much moisture, the storm's going to be dry, and it's not going to, be able to, sustain itself. But, just overall, the surface conditions are still favorable for the development of tropical cyclones, so, and the sustainability of them. So, yeah, don't be surprised, if the tropics does heat up here within the next few weeks or so. But right now, we are kind of in a quiet period. So, basically, in terms of the Atlantic, we do have kind of waves here, like where, at one moment it's, kind of quiet, and then the next moment it's relatively active. So, we're kind of in that one of those quiet moments here at the moment. So, moving on now, let's go ahead and take a look here, actually at the Central Pacific real quick. Nothing really expected here. Same thing as the Atlantic over the next few days, relatively quiet here. Now, here's where things get fun. Interesting enough, we do have a new hurricane here in the Eastern Pacific. Now, we are welcoming Hurricane Rick to the 2021 Pacific hurricane season here. Now, Rick has actually intensified relatively quickly here. So let's go and take a look at these specifications in terms of this. So, as of 10 o'clock a.m. Central Time, there was maximum sustained winds of 80 miles per hour, with, of course, gusts probably being near 100 miles per hour. Central low pressure at 985 millibars, currently moving to the north-northwest at 7 miles per hour. And it's located at 14.4 north, basically a 101.5 west, pretty much just under central Mexico here. Now, there is hurricane warnings in effect for Rick, and here's where things really get interesting. So, we move into the cone here. This thing's expected to become a major hurricane, meaning this thing's expected to become a Category 3 storm in a very, very short period of time. This thing is really kicking off. This thing's really strengthening quick. But right now, it is a hurricane, right at the moment. And there is hurricane warnings here in effect for the areas of red, for the coast of Mexico here. I don't know exactly where this is at. All I know is it's pretty much in the southern, central bits of Mexico. So there is those hurricane warnings in effect. We do have tropical storm warnings as well, for the sides of this warning here for the, the hurricane warning. Basically meaning that, when, tropical storm conditions are expected, in those tropical storm warning areas. And, of course, hurricane conditions are expected here in the red. So that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of that. So this thing is expected to make landfall around 7 o'clock a.m. on Monday as a hurricane. And this thing's relatively going to die quick, because you moved into the mountains and the storm can't, keep itself organized because of the terrain change. But this thing is expected to die off relatively quickly as it moves inland. So we'll stay tuned for that. We'll cover over this in tomorrow's video as well, just before this thing makes landfall. We might even break it down a little bit more tomorrow. Just as this thing, right before it makes landfall. So that's what we're dealing with in terms of the tropics. So things are really starting to heat up with, especially Hurricane Rick here going on in the Eastern Pacific. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Storm Prediction Center side of things. Here's kind of a little glimpse of what we're seeing for tomorrow. So I forgot to change it to day one, but So today we actually are dealing with the threat for severe weather as well. We are in a severe threat level 2 out of 5 in the slight zone. This being the strongest area for today's concerns. Basically, here across the Midwest and the eastern central Great Plains, for areas such as northern Missouri, southern Iowa, southeastern Nebraska, and northeastern Kansas here inside of this slight risk. And of course, we do have a marginal risk stretching from eastern Panhandle all the way up to western Illinois, central and western Illinois here within this marginal risk. So basically, you might see these, kind of later, these lighter shade greens here. This is basically showing that, just general thunderstorms are possible, not necessarily severe criteria, just kind of your average thunderstorm going on for this moment. But, nothing really too, extreme expected inside of these areas. But, the kind of the main area we're paying attention for today is this in the stark green area, and especially this, this yellow area. So let's go ahead and break this down a bit. In terms of tornadoes, we do not have a chance for tornadoes today. This was actually updated here a moment ago. I just checked it, and actually there was actually a 2% tornado risk here for the southeast bit of Kansas, but it looks like they just canceled that, the Storm Prediction Center, so that is no longer in effect. In terms of wind, we do have a 5% chance of wind here, stretching from the eastern panhandle of Texas all the way up through central Kansas, cutting through Oklahoma, basically bits of the western state here of Oklahoma. So what this means is every single 25 miles, you could see, winds, over severe criteria. So basically 58 miles per hour or more within every single 25 miles. You have a 5% chance of seeing that here inside of this brown area. So we move on to the big picture for today's, severe threat. Pretty much the big picture. The number one thing, basically the most severe thing for today will be in terms of the hail. We do have a relatively large 15% zone here for bits of the, basically the eastern central Great Plains and bits of the Midwest here. So basically every single 25 miles, you have a 15% chance of seeing hail 1 inch in diameter or greater within this region. Of course, with the overall threat stretching from the eastern panhandle of Texas all the way up to basically central and western Illinois here. So pretty much that's what we're dealing with in terms of the hail for today. So if you guys are anywhere inside of this region, just relatively stay close to the weather for today, as there is severe weather expected. However, let's go ahead and move on to day 2. Now here's where things really get crazy. We do have an enhanced risk, a relatively large enhanced risk here for basically bits of extreme eastern and central Oklahoma here. We do have basically north and northwestern Arkansas. Most of Missouri, cutting through the, southern, all the way through the northern part of the state here. And we actually do have a little bit of an enhanced risk here for basically the western part of Illinois here. And the overall marginal threat, this dark green, relatively covers a very large distance here. So this is, kind of a very large area of which severe weather can be possible. So let's go ahead and break this down. This is where things get crazy. We actually do have a marginal risk here for basically extreme northwest. But this is where our major concern is for tomorrow. So, in terms of tornadoes, things are getting crazy. So we do have a 10% chance significant risk here for basically parts of Missouri, stretching all the way down through basically extreme northwestern Arkansas. And so what this means is that inside of this, this little dashed black lines here, this shows that you can see a 10% chance of tornadoes being EF2 and higher, potentially EF2 to EF5. Inside of this area. And honestly, there's a chance this thing could even be upgraded further down the line. I honestly believe that this thing could go to a moderate risk, severe threat level 4 out of 5. Right now it's a severe threat level 3 out of 5. I do believe this thing could be upgraded, as we further go down the line. So stay tuned for that. This definitely cannot be ruled out at this time. But in terms of tornadoes, there's actually a relatively large chance of tornadoes, across, basically the eastern Great Plains and into the Midwest here, and bits of western Ohio Valley as well. So if you guys are anywhere inside this region here, definitely be paying attention close to the weather over the next several days. So go ahead and move on to wind. We actually do have a 30% chance of significant winds, likely being over 70 to 80 miles per hour winds inside of this 30% significant zone. This is basically stretching from northern Arkansas through basically central and southeastern basically Missouri, and then actually into a little sliver of western Illinois here as well. And then the overall threat for winds basically over severe criteria are expected throughout this 5% zone and inwards. Of course, the higher values, meaning there's a more probable chance of you seeing those damaging winds associated with that. So that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of the damaging winds for tomorrow. So In terms of hail, we actually do have a relatively large 30% zone here stretching across, basically central Missouri into western Illinois here. Especially with that, hail being 1 inch in diameter or greater. This is actually your largest area of seeing hail. And of course, we do have a relatively large 15% zone here as well, stretching basically from extreme northeastern Texas into Illinois here, basically southern Iowa. And pretty much everywhere inside of this yellow zone, you have a 15% chance of seeing hail 1 inch in diameter or greater. And then, of course, the chance lowers as you go into this 5% zone, but it actually relatively covers a large area. So there's a large chance that we could see, hail 1 inch in diameter or greater for tomorrow. So tomorrow, a lot of craziness is expected. So large tornadoes, large hail, and extreme damaging winds are forecasted for tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. We do plan on going live. I'm not exactly sure what time we're going to be going live. It really just depends on, pretty much, when storms fire off. But whenever storms do fire off, that's whenever we're going to be going live. So stay tuned for that. So moving on to day 3 now, we actually do have another risk, for basically bits of the southeast moving into the mid-Atlantic here, and actually bits of the northeast here. We do have a relatively large marginal risk. Now, there is no breakdown for day 3. However, I can say here that there is, damaging winds and hail are expected, across the area. Now, that's basically what we're dealing with for tomorrow, and I can honestly say an isolated tornado cannot be ruled out, as I've seen some soundings here in central and northern Virginia supporting hotographs that are favorable for tornadoes. So we'll definitely monitor this over the next few days. This is still for day 3. This is actually for Monday, I believe. So yeah, we'll just stay tuned for that. As this event does get a little closer. We still have to deal with tomorrow's chaos with this enhanced risk, but the severe weather does not end there. We go ahead and move on to day 4. We have another area of 15% chance. Now, there's pretty high confidence here, because the Storm Prediction Center is actually forecasting this far out. Usually when they forecast this far out, that usually means things are going to be going down. So we do have a 15% chance of severe weather through day 4. This would be on Tuesday, for basically across the southern Great Plains into the central Great Plains. Stretching from basically central Texas all the way through southern Nebraska. That's basically what we're dealing with in terms of that upper level trough. But as this event does get closer, we'll go more in depth of that. But let me give you a surprise, guys. It's not over yet. There's another 15% zone here across the southeast, stretching from basically eastern Louisiana all the way through the, basically the panhandle of Florida here. There's a lot of severe weather expected to go on through the next several days. This does include bits of southern Mississippi as well as, southern Alabama as well. But like I said, as this event does get closer, we'll monitor this as well. So, wow. Through the next several days, there's a lot of severe weather expected. So we're definitely kind of in a very active time here for severe weather. Now, if we go back like last week, there's really not much going on, but now everything just really ramps up. They call basically fall, quote-unquote, second spring, basically because, thermodynamics does support, some instability and usually causes some of these events. But that's kind of pushing, into the, very technical side of things. But basically, yeah, severe weather is expected this weekend into next week. So let's go ahead and move on to the satellite view. So with all that craziness out of the way, we're kind of pushing a relatively large video for today, and I'm sorry about that, but it's relatively clear across the southeast. I'll try to keep this as quick as possible. Relatively clear across the southeast. As you move into the mid-Atlantic and the northeast, you do have a bit more clouds. Moving into the Midwest, pretty much for areas such as Missouri, southern Missouri, we do have, looks like some thunderstorm activity and some cloud activity stretching, across this area. For bits of Oklahoma, it's relatively clear here as you move into the northern Great Plains and basically the bits of the northern Midwest here. It is relatively clear as well, but it's, of course, as you move into the northwest here, it's relatively mostly cloudy and across the northwest. This is where we're seeing most of the clouds. But that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of that. We do have our jet here. We do have a little bit of ridging going on, so the jet stream is kind of shooting up and ridging here, and we have that that low up here in Canada. But that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of the observations as of 12:49 p.m. Eastern time. So moving on to the model side of things now. Now we do have that threat for severe weather we were talking about. As we move in, you can actually see this low right here develop, and it's generally moving to the east. You can see where it draws that line of severe weather. This is basically your QLCS. It's just a linear system, quasi-linear convective system, with all that all that severe threat So this low will generally move to the east, bringing that severe severe weather along with it, across the bits of the Ohio Valley and eventually into the Mid-Atlantic region, bringing that, that day 3 marginal and slight risk, which we saw momentarily for day 3, momentarily back when we looked at the Storm Prediction Center. But that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of that. Now let's go ahead and dive into basically what we're dealing with for tomorrow. So let's go ahead and take a look at Float 2. This is basically, this is that QLCS, this is that line of severe weather we are expecting. We'll go ahead and take a look at the kind of overall picture. I'm trying to keep this video kind of short, so we'll kind of, break this down. So this is for 21Z. This is basically the afternoon to evening hours for tomorrow. So let's go and take a sounding here across, central Missouri. We're going to take another one here across, basically northeastern Arkansas, and we'll take another one here across eastern Oklahoma as well. So in terms of the one for central Missouri, relatively, there is a slight varying wind shear pattern here. Definitely a strong enough shear. We do have dew points in the mid-60s, which is well enough supported for that. There is no cap in place, so storms will be able to fire. D-Cape, around 674, so that's, it's probably a marginal threat for damaging winds. Precipitable water about 1.5 inches, so it's kind of on the heavier side, so the rain can be pushing down in your updrafts, limiting, hail and stuff. Maybe some small hail with this sounding as well, but overall instability with this, pushing over 2,200 joules per kilogram, that's a good amount of instability. So overall, not a bad sounding, it definitely can produce, the triple threat for severe weather, including, tornadoes, hail, and damaging winds. So we move into, basically, northwestern Arkansas here. We do have that nicer veering wind shear pattern here across the surface. Shear is definitely strong enough. Dew points in the mid-60s, which is definitely supportive. D-Cape, around a little bit above 500 joules per kilogram, which, can support, damaging winds. Mixed layer Cape here, shooting at around 1,800 joules per kilogram, which is definitely enough to get the job done. Wet bulb zero temperature, kind of a little bit above 700 millibars, but precipitable water, is quite low. So definitely hail can be a concern in the side of the sounding as well. So definitely stay tuned for that. So let's go ahead and take a look at that, that eastern Oklahoma sounding. There is, still a varying wind shear pattern. It looks like there's a bit of a cap in place, so storms might have a bit of a hard time firing off in the sounding. Hail looks like it might be a pretty large concern here. Precipitable water very, very low, and as well as your wet bulb zero temperature near 700 millibars. So you can see really large hail with this sounding. Not to mention, D-Cape is pushing over 1,200 joules per kilogram. So honestly, 70 to 80 mile per hour wind gusts can be possible inside of this sounding. Now, that you can't take this as exact. This is just one model exact, basically just one idea. You have to take everyone's opinions. But, in sake of today's video being so long, we're kind of, pushing against this. We're kind of pushing through this relatively quickly. Instability, over 1,700 joules per kilogram. Anything over 1,000 joules per kilogram is definitely enough to get the job done in terms of severe weather. So that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of that. We move on to 00Z, which will be 7 o'clock p.m. Central. Let's go ahead and take a cherry pick sounding here, basically across northern Arkansas and southern Missouri. This is basically kind of like the worst case scenario here in terms of NAM. We do have a nice hooking hodograph here. We do have a mixed layer Cape, pushing 2,500 joules per kilogram. That is a lot of instability. D-Cape, near 1,000 joules per kilogram, so definitely damaging winds can be a problem. Precipitable water, kind of high. But our wet bulb zero temperature is, kind of, hitting here at the 700 millibar mark, which can support hail, especially with this atmosphere being relatively dry here, between your outside temperature and your dew points here, showing that it's relatively dry with that lower relative humidity inside the area. So that definitely can support hail down the line. So that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of that. So kind of interesting here. So that's what we're dealing with for this. We got to move into the, kind of moving into the overnight hours here. We're going to take another cherry pick sounding here. Let's go and take one across, southeastern Missouri. We'll go ahead and take a look here at Namnest as well real quick. I'm trying to keep this video to a minimum. We're already at 19 minutes on this video, so I'm relatively sorry for that, but there is contamination with the sounding. Really nice, veering hodograph here. But this basically, the sounding belongs in the trash. That's basically where the best area of this sounding belongs. So let's go and move on to the bits of Namnest here. This is basically higher resolution. You can actually see this. We'll go and take a sounding, pretty much a cherry pick sounding here across northern Arkansas and southern Missouri real quick. And we'll go and see what we're dealing with in terms of the severe weather according to this model. And then at the end of this, we'll be taking a look at some dew points, and then we'll be moving on to the end segment for today's video. So we'll be looking at that. So this usually does take a little bit longer because, like I said, this is a more higher resolution model to load. So here we go. PDS tornado stands for particularly dangerous situation. This dew points in the upper 60s, which is definitely supportive. Nice veering wind shear pattern. Nice sickle shaped hodograph here. Definitely strong enough shear here. Wet bulb zero temperature a little bit above 700 millibars. Precipitable water, kind of moderate here. DK pushing over 1,000 joules per kilogram, so probably 70 mile per hour wind gusts are possible here. Overall, not a bad sounding in terms of that. We do have a slight cap, but I do think that parcels will be able to rise. Basically, thunderstorms will be able to push through this. In terms of instability, we do have just over over 2,000 joules per kilogram, which, like I said, that's enough to get the job done. So that's what we're dealing with in terms of that. So let's go and take a look here at dew points across the area. So basically, dew points in the upper 60s and actually into isolated spots of the 70s here across, Arkansas here, basically central and western bits of the state. We move into basically Missouri. We do have, 60s in the dew points in the mid 60s and actually up to the upper 60s as well. So dew points are definitely favorable. You can actually see as that front moves across the area, pushes all that, that air with it. As you can see, as that, that severe storms do initiate and they do fire off and move to the east. But that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of models for today. So let's go ahead and move on to the last bit of today's video. So generally, the main threat for, the current warnings, watches, advisories, and so on is for the western side of the country here. We do have a flood warning, and actually, we'll get here in a moment. But we'll move on to the non-precipitation side of things. We do have high wind warnings in effect for bits of, Oregon here, and basically bits of northern California. You can see here, so high winds are expected here. High wind watches, for bits of Utah as well as Nevada. You can see here there's actually a bit for basically southeastern Washington and bits of basically northeastern Oregon. We do have wind advisories near, here across Idaho and into basically the, bits of Oregon as well, stretching, kind of across either the east bit and bits of the western state as well. But that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of that. So basically, high winds can be possible throughout all of those areas here. So in terms of winter weather, we do have winter storm watches in effect for basically the central and eastern parts of California and central, basically Idaho here as well. I don't know exactly too much on, how much snow you can expect, but be tuned for that, locally. If you guys are in this area, definitely stay tuned for that. Winter storm watches are in effect. So basically, usually what winter storm watches means is that winter weather is possible, and there could be some significant impacts, with winter weather. So stay tuned for that. So let's go and move into the flooding side of things. We do have a flash flood warning here across basically southeastern bits of Kansas. We do have a flash flood watch, and actually a flood watch here across northern California, basically central and northern California, as there's a lot of rain moving into the basically the bits of the west coast here right now. There's a lot of rain, and there's also relatively tight isobars, in some of these models, and actually we can go ahead and take a look at real quick. Like I said, I'm trying to keep this video relatively, kind of short here, but let's go ahead and move into sea level pressure. You can actually see as we move into time here, you can see that these isobars, basically these lines, are relatively close together, showing that there's a pretty large area of pressure gradient force. Pretty much the temperature dropping relatively quickly over a short period of area. This is where we're seeing those high wind warnings and stuff going on, because usually those tight isobars usually mean that there is high winds expected. But yeah, that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of that. And then we do have, of course, flood warnings here. Basically across, they actually finally removed that flood warning across the northeastern bits of Indiana here. But we do have a flood warning here in effect for basically still bits of the, the coast of Texas and bits of basically southwestern Louisiana as well. So that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of that. Wow, that was a lot to cover. So we are now pushing into 24 minutes in the videos. But anyways, guys, that's going to wrap it for today. I hope everyone has a wonderful day today. My name is Andrew Heishman. I'm the lead forecaster here in WW116. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments down below. If you guys want me to do a forecast for your area, if you guys are kind of concerned about the severe weather and you kind of want to know more about your local region, feel free to leave down in the comments down below, and I'll be definitely sure to send a reply back to you guys. But anyways, guys, thanks again for everything. I looked at last video that I posted. We got quite a bit of views, and so I just wanted to appreciate everyone for that, and just thank you guys for the support. It truly means a lot. And I'm trying to push more daily videos out for you guys and everything like that. But Alright guys, so that's going to deal with it for today's video. We'll catch you in the next video for tomorrow, as we'll have more, updates on the hurricane and stuff. But anyways guys, like I said, my name is Andrew Heichman. I'm the lead forecaster here in WW116, and I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend.